It's 4 o'clock in Radio Cairo. This is World of Info. We're coming live from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad is at the control. And in this beautiful afternoon in Cairo, we have a great pleasure and honor to have with us Her Excellency Mrs. Hilde Klemetsdal, the Ambassador of Norway in Cairo. And it's really very kind of her to accept to give us some of her precious time in Radio Cairo. Excellency, really it's a great pleasure and honor to have you with us in this beautiful afternoon.
It is a great pleasure for me. Very happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, the experienced diplomat coming to Cairo who has served in two different distinguished places before. In New York, in the permanent expedition or in the permanent delegate of Norway in the United Nations, and also as DCM in Kenya, as in Nairobi. So now an exposure to Egypt. So three very important posts for Norway definitely needs a very talented diplomat like you with a degree in political science. Tell us about why did you choose this career as a start?
Well, I have always been very interested in learning about different cultures, countries, and very fascinated with foreign policy. And I think for me, what more exciting place to come to than Egypt and this region, right? So it's just been a long time. Ever since I was little, I wanted to travel and meet new people and learn about different cultures and people. So for me, this is it's a dream job.
And Norway is a very distinguished country. It has a total area of 385,207 square kilometers and had a population of 5,400,000 in November 2020. The country shares a long eastern border with Sweden. It's bordered by Finland and Russia to the northeast, and Checker Strait to the south, on the other side of which are Denmark and the United Kingdom. So European, yet so Scandinavian at the same time. How much geography affected the country? How much was the geography did affect the country?
I think Norway is a very rugged country. It has a lot of mountains and hard, the geography with the mountains and the cold weather and the long winters. We think perhaps it has shaped us a bit. We, at least historically, tend to think of ourselves as pretty tough. It's a hard-working people historically, because we've had, people trying to survive on their little farms, doing some fisheries, and for many centuries that's really how we survived. So I think it has shaped us in the way that we are, basically traditionally small farmer communities. We really didn't have any nobility at all. So which has, I guess, created a strong egalitarian society in Norway and a strong feeling of equality. I think that has shaped us.
And Norway has a great problem which had always through the years and the centuries, which is the small amount of the population, which sometimes in periods of famine and in periods of epidemics really wiped out some of the population, and even meant that the farms are not having enough farmers to plant them, and some people really tried to immigrate and leave the country. So it was an expelling country for many years and centuries, and so that's why some of United States and Canada has a strong Norwegian ancestorship population in Canada and the United States countries, especially in the north, because these countries, the people had to be very tough to stand the bad weather conditions, and the Norwegians fit very much in such weather in Canada and the United States north. So was it to this extent the environment and the epidemics very unkind?
Well, the Black Plague in the 1300s, I think that wiped out half the population in Norway. So you had, farms empty, all of a sudden you had like big communities and there was no one there. in terms of emigrating to the US and to Canada, I think the problem there was during the 1800s, early 1900s. It was just a lack of farming land. That was the problem, which also, made a lot of people do that journey. I also have relatives in Canada, but I think there's in the US there's almost as many people descending from Norway as there are people in Norway.
Exactly, that's what I meant to say. Yes,
that's a lot of them. Yeah.
But Norway has been affected with its neighbors, and we have to admit that. And some of these neighbors, or two exactly of these neighbors, acted like big brothers, if we use the expression.
Yes.
Nowadays, of course, there is a strong bond between the old Scandinavian countries, and they belong to the same club of kind cooperation and equal kinds of cooperation between Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, and of course the three Baltic republics. But still, in the history, we can find that Sweden and Denmark acted as if they are the big brothers. And the union with Denmark, was it really the union with Denmark and Sweden inevitable? Did it really had to happen?
Well, I think after the Black Plague and Norway was very weak and poor, and Denmark and Sweden were always important and rich countries at this stage. So I think. I don't know if it was inevitable, but we certainly were seen as the backward country back then, with little resources. People didn't have education. We didn't have any nobility like they had in Denmark and Sweden. So I think the 400 years with Danish rule. It was, natural, many ways, maybe not inevitable, but we did become dependent on Denmark, yes.
The 19th century has seen the rise of the romantic nationalism of Norwegian people. And some of the romantic writers said really that the 434 years of the union with Denmark was like a 400-year night. And for Norwegian, especially when they know and feel what a word night means, when they're talking about 4 months per year where you have no sun, and it's almost 2 or 3 hours, a shy sun would rise at 10 o'clock in the morning and disappear by 2 or 12. Something like this is very harsh when you resemble a whole 400 years of darkness.
Yes.
Was it that tough?
No, I think the term 400 years night was a bit exaggerated. In some ways, a lot of the resources from Norway were, exploited and sent to the capital in Copenhagen in Denmark. But there wasn't all, everything wasn't all bad. I think we also benefited some from that. I guess you could call it union with Denmark, but I guess it was very much dominated by Denmark. But I think, like you mentioned, this romanticism, the period in the 19th century, there was a need to distance oneself, Norway, from Denmark. So maybe they painted a darker picture than...
So they painted a dark picture to stay. But in the 19th century has seen another union.
Yes, that's true.
With a stronger sister, of whom you use, or word, or stronger brother on the borders to the east. And this is Sweden. And it has seen, at the same time, the rise of Norwegian romanticism. So the people were fed up of the union by the end of the 19th century, 1905, to speak in particular. Or what made them have the union and what made them have the separation? Well,
I think in 1814 we did become independent from Denmark, and we entered into a union with Sweden. Again, Sweden, of course, being the stronger part, but over the century and in the 19th century, we did become more and more dependent. We had, a parliamentarian system. We had our political parties. And at the end of the century, then it was really only the foreign service that we did not have for ourselves, and which really initiated, was the strongest cause of the breakup with Sweden, which fortunately ended in a peaceful manner. But then again, like you mentioned earlier, there was a very strong movement, which we saw, in many countries in Europe during that time. The nationalism, the romanticism, was a very strong wave in Europe. It certainly also hit Norway. And as I mentioned before, Norway, we didn't have a gentry, we didn't have the nobility, we didn't have a lot of wealthy people at all. It was mainly farmers. So the nationalism in Norway was, it's always constructed in some way, this national identities. And the Norwegian national identity was very much constructed around sort of romanticizing around the rural population and farmers and folklore and the fairy tales and folk, the costumes and everything. So that was the way the national romanticism, that's how it looked in Norway. And to sort of separate ourselves both from Denmark and Sweden, it took a very rural form.
So after the break, we're still with Her Excellency Ambassador of Norway to talk about the independence, about 1905 and the role of Christian Michelsen in the formation of the new Norway that we know today.
Yes.
Stay tuned with us in the World of Info from Radio Cairo. So you're still listening to us here in the World of Info in Radio Cairo with Her Excellency Ambassador Hilde Klemetsdal, the Ambassador of Norway in Cairo, and we're talking about Norway, and we're talking about a very dear date for all the Norwegians, because it is the year of independence.
Yes.
And although every country in the world suffered to reach the independence with a lot of casualties, whether these casualties were material casualties or human being casualties or sacrifices, yet some people in Norway were intelligent enough and sharp enough to make this independence as much as possible with the least possible damage. And I think a lot things can be attributed to Mr. Christian Michelsen, who was a shipping magnate and statesman and Prime Minister of Norway from 1905 to 1907, who played a central role in the peaceful separation of Norway from Sweden on the 7th of June 1905. A national referendum confirmed the people's preference for monarchy over republic. Though the separation was peaceful, yet the 20th century was not so kind. So tell us about this moment in particular, the 1905 independence. It was a bit tough, but you managed to do that. And I think this is a great accomplishment.
I think it's a great accomplishment, and also from the Swedish side, it was a peaceful separation, a divorce, and both with Sweden and Denmark, all our Nordic friends, we have a very, very close and positive relationship today. We work very closely together on many issues, so I think this is a positive example of how things can be done. But this was, building up over some time because we wanted our own foreign policy. Foreign service, which is why I'm here today.
Yes.
So I'm quite happy about that as well. And first I think they asked, the Parliament asked for just a consular service. Can we have our own consular service? But no, they did not want to give us that. And then it just built up. And then after a while, we demanded to become our own separate country. But then, of course, we did have. Our constitution is from 1814, so that has, we've had that same constitution ever since. And but this was sort of our final step into the independence in 1905, and we decided, we had a referendum, decided we wanted to have a king. So there was a referendum, a republic or a kingdom. So we have we still have a kingdom today.
And I think the choice of the king, as you were very kind enough to tell us, Norway has never seen nobility because of the condition of the environment, the harshness of the environment, the amount of land that is available for farming doesn't allow a lot of people to have great areas of farms and therefore have titles. The owner of big farms, of big acres of farms. So mostly it was like a socialist country in the beginning, and having a lot of people having small farms all over. So you decided to get a king or a royal family, a member of the royal family, and you went to Denmark, where you were lucky enough to have a family, a royal family that are still keeping the democratic and the peaceful arrangement of Norway. And this kind royal family stood the test of time, whether this was in World War I or in World War II, with their great efforts to maintain the integrity of the country. Tell us why the choice went to, for example, to Denmark, not Sweden. I know, of course, the Sweden, they are related to the famous general, the famous marshal of Bernadotte, the famous marshal of Napoleon. And why is it in the beginning Danish, and how the integration happened?
To be honest, I don't know exactly why we went to Denmark. I think that was maybe the closest place to go. But after, I think, the very big test, I would say, was perhaps, like you said, the Second World War. The king really became a very strong national symbol, a very unifying symbol for Norwegians, and I would say gave sort of a symbol of national identity and pride, and gave a strong sense of national unity to everyone who was in Norway trying to resist the Nazi occupation during the Second World War. And there was a lot of thousands, tens of thousands of Norwegians who were engaged in the resistance, and gave a good fight to the Nazis, and through intelligence and sabotage. And
yes, I really would like to attract the attention of our listeners to what happened in World War II. Norway was a neutral country, yet it was invaded by the Nazis, and unfortunately has fallen in the arms or in the hands of the Nazi army. And yet the Norwegians didn't show a glimpse of treason. They went all to fight hard for their liberty, for their democracy, and especially the commercial navy was able to escape and have a big share in the civil and the defense work across the Atlantic, transferring a lot of troops and a lot of people, and Norway was famous for its commercial fleet that stood the test of time in the war. And I really admire also the idea that the royal family and the king was given a name that belonged to an ancient Norwegian king in the 10th century. This gives an idea that he's being christened as a real Norwegian family or a royal family. So World War II has seen a lot of conflicts, has seen a lot of pain, and a lot of water has crossed after the bridge. Let's talk about after the war, because after the war, Norway, as you said, has been integrated by fire and by the strong will of the people to become a country that has earned and won its own independence, and searching for a place under even the North Sun, as they say. So tell us about this period, because this has seen a great progress, the change or the gradual change from a humble country with minimal resources to a country that is starting to gain a place under the sun.
Yes. Yeah, I think after the Second World War, of course, Norway, like a lot of other countries in Europe, was quite poor, had a lot of challenges. But it's sometimes thought that we were poor until the moment we struck oil, which is not really true. There was quite a lot of things going on before that as well, and the development of a welfare state happened. That started quite early. But of course, when we did try to start the exploring oil in the 50s, early 60s, there wasn't so much hope that we would find anything. But of course, it has been a very, very successful story for us, and of course, it has contributed a lot to our ability to develop a welfare state.
Yeah. And it's not doing only, I mean, it's not 100% of the income. I know it's the only country outside the Middle East which is having mega production of oil, and yet it has formed almost 35% of the GDP. It's not 100%.
No.
Right. So some people have the misinformation that Norway is an oil-producing country and it depends 100% on the oil, which is totally untrue.
Yes, that is untrue.
Tell us about that, please.
No, but of course it is a very important part of our economy, obviously. But when it comes to production of crude oil, we produce about 2% of the global demand and about 3% of the gas, but we are a very big exporter because our own electricity in the country, is covered by hydroelectricity mainly. So, we are the third largest exporter of natural gas in the world, and I think when it comes to oil, about the 10th, or maybe declining a bit. But so yeah, obviously it is a very important income for us, and now what we're trying to do, of course, is to invest some of this into a green shift, and a lot of the technology that has been developed by the petroleum industry is now being also used to develop green solutions in the green shift, and a lot of offshore wind, we have hydrogen, carbon capture, so there's a lot of new innovation and technology going on as well, which is, crucial now for the situation the world is in, obviously.
Since we're talking about that, we have to give a mention to the fact that COVID has caused a decline in the export of gas, natural gas, and Europe is warned to have a big suffrage this year, especially in the winter time from the lack of gas. So what Norway can do to save Europe nowadays?
Well, I think we export a lot of the demand from Europe. I'm not exactly sure how much, but we do cover quite a bit of Europe's demand for gas. But the prices have become very, very high now, and there is a shortage. And I understand there's coal being produced, and so I think in terms of climate change and lowering the emissions, it's concerning, obviously. But no, for us, it is certainly the largest. It's a big sector for us, but it has also given us enormous security economically, and it also has given us the Norwegian pension fund, the oil fund, which is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, actually. Now,
I read once that Norway said that, the political system of Norway decided that they're not going to be overspending the money. They're keeping the money of the oil as a social fund. Tell us about this in particular, because this is the question: how far did this affect the citizen of today? The great wealth and the great unexpected wealth of oil, which is like a fairy tale that happened to the Norwegians, and they never thought that it will transform to money until the mid-80s and the early 90s. So how much did this affect the citizen of today of Norway? Are they really big spenders and they're all riding Rolls Royce? They can. They can, but you don't.
No.
Tell us how you're arranging this.
I think we were very lucky when we found oil that we had very responsible politicians. A lot of times, you see countries who find oil and gas. It can be a curse, rather than a blessing.
That's the point I want to raise. Yes.
So for us, I think it can lead to corruption and huge gaps between poor and rich, and social instability and unfair distribution of wealth. So I think for us, the very responsible and wise politicians that we had at the time, who decided that this is owned by the whole Norwegian people, owns this oil and the resources, and for us it has been a success story that has enabled us to have free education through university. We have free healthcare, very strong, heavily subsidized daycare system, which also then allows for women to participate in the labor market. And that again, of course, increases the GDP enormously when you have that high level of women's participation in working life. But it takes a lot of investments to be able to do that as well.
And you have a strong taxation system. The more that you earn, like in Sweden, for example, the more you earn, the more you're going to pay taxes.
Yeah.
So the number of millionaires are not like in other countries, right? They're not that high number, right? More or less.
I think it's changing a bit. We do, of course, pay more tax usually, of course, when we do with higher incomes. But then, the very rich people, they also have other types of incomes and sources of income. So we do have some very rich people in Norway as well. Maybe not. For instance, in fish farming is a very lucrative business in Norway. But all in all, I would say that it's still quite an egalitarian society, and the idea that everybody should have equal opportunities is quite strong across everyone in Norway. And I think that's something that this income has given us, that opportunity.
You talked about the education, which makes Norway one of the best countries in the world where you have decent education. Was it always there, or it was subsidized by the petroleum industry?
No, actually, investments in education started very early in Norway, 1900s, 19th century. So I think that's actually something that was decided very early on and did not depend on revenues from the petroleum industry, but of course it has given a lot of opportunity to give, build a better quality, and also to offer like tertiary education and university education free to everyone.
I think the complex that you have mentioned just earlier in the program, talking about how the Swedes and the Danish looked at Norway in the beginning, in the early in the 16th and 17th century, as the lack of education that helped other countries to control them. I think this became very accepted by the Norwegian to try to change this into a better stature for all the population, right?
Yes, that could be. And also, when our constitution was developed early 1800s, we also had, it was also a lot of egalitarian ideas coming into that, and you had actually farmers coming in and participating as well, and that idea of equality, I think, is also very strong historically in Norway, and that also probably is a part of the idea that everybody should have access to education.
Yes, of course, education is one of the great pillars of progress.
It is very important.
Well, we're still listening into the World of Info with Her Excellency Ambassador Hilde Klemetsdal, the Ambassador of Norway to Cairo, in this beautiful afternoon. And thank you very much for coming to our program, and we are here to stay to talk more about Norway. So you're still listening to the World of Info, coming live from Radio Cairo, and today we're having Her Excellency Ambassador Hilde Klemetsdal, the Ambassador of Norway to Cairo and to Egypt, of course, and we are talking about something which really attracts the attention of everyone who reads that, hears that, feels that. And I can tell you here that Her Excellency has a big smile, admirable smile. No wonder, because Norway ranked first on the World Happiness Report for 2017 and currently ranks first on the OECD Better Life Index, the Index of Public Integrity and Freedom Index, and the Democracy Index. Norway also has one of the lowest crime rates in the world. How was that possible? You have to tell me. What's your secret?
What is my secret?
Yes.
Well, of course, I think it helps that we are only 5.5 million people.
Yeah.
I think it makes many things easier. But I think, it has to do, of course, that we have a strong welfare state. We have a social security net, so that you are taken care of if everything goes wrong in your life, and sometimes, you know, it can.
Of course.
I think also people in Norway feel like they have good opportunities in terms of education, healthcare. You can go and get the treatment you need if you get sick. We have high quality healthcare, and it's all free. Also, I think the gender equality is something that's positive in Norway.
Of course, you're totally biased, I'm sure.
Of course, I'm biased, but
and you have 2 daughters,
I
right?
have 2 daughters.
Yes.
I have 1 son, and I think I tell them that they're very lucky to be born where they are, where they have all the opportunities that they want.
The sky is the limit.
Yes, I think it should. Many things are in place for them to do what they want to do and pursue the dreams that they have, and I think it's also, it says, here, like you asked about the public integrity. People feel mostly that they can trust the government, they can trust the information that comes from government.
You told me off air about a prime minister
Yes.
who was an extremely conscientious and very cautious about the public expenditure.
Yes.
That he wouldn't take a pencil back home,
Yeah.
and he wouldn't buy new clothes until they are totally worn off. What's the name of the gentleman, please?
Gerhardsen. He was prime minister for many years, and during the time we also were searching for oil in the 50s and 60s. So some very wise decisions were made at that time, and this was, of course, something that was shared across all parties in Parliament as well, to make sure that we did not give these all our oil revenues would not end up in the hands of private foreign companies, but would actually benefit Norway and the Norwegian people. So they have to pay a lot of tax to the Norwegian government still, the companies that are there, and also to make sure that that whole political culture, I think, that was in place with it was across many politicians, but I think he was really somebody who personified it with Gerhardsen. Like I said, he would not bring a pencil home from the office to take back home.
That's extreme.
Yes.
Transparency.
The transparency is strong. It's a good culture among bureaucracy in Norway, where people feel like it's quite efficient, and that you can trust democracy, the bureaucrats that are working, and it's such an important role in a democratic society that you have a well-functioning, effective bureaucracy. And I think that's also sounds boring, but I think it's an important part of a society where people feel that they have equal opportunities, and it's not biased against certain groups. Of course, it's not perfect. No country is perfect, I have to say. Not everyone in Norway is happy, and there's obviously also groups that are being discriminated against.
So when we're talking about Norway, I think one of the biggest problems, do you have an aging population?
Yes, we do have an aging population.
So, for example, Sweden was very cautious, we'll tell you about, of course you know that, was very cautious about this policy and had great fears. So they started, I don't want to use the word importing, but they are started a way of natural selection of immigrants from different parts of the world who come with a lot of energy and a lot of persistence and perseverance and will to build a new life, and at the same time accept the life of a Scandinavian country, and therefore they were able to reverse the aging population census and start to have more integrated people. They didn't reach double the population or half the population. I think they increased by 1 or 2 million from a strong ex-community or immigrants from expats coming from different parts of the world. So this was the Sweden solution. What was or what is the solution for Norway? It's a country that has a lot of natural resources, but time is the greatest enemy for countries of the north.
Yes, and I think, here Egypt and Norway has very different challenges.
Yes, of course.
We do have an aging population. I think the average average childbirth is 1.7 or something like that, which is, you know, higher than many countries in Europe, but still, but our population is also growing slowly because of immigration. So we also have immigrants coming to Norway.
You have quarter a million or something like that nowadays, almost, of non-Norwegian born.
I would think so. Yeah. I think that's correct. So in Oslo, of course, there I would say most of the immigrants are, but yes, it has been important for Norway as well to get workers from outside and from other countries. Absolutely.
So this might be the solution.
I think there are many solutions. I don't know if so we don't have like an open immigration, working in immigration, but we do have some specialists coming in, and also, you know, we are not part of the European Union, but we are part of the open market. So we have a lot of people from Europe coming into Norway.
So you're not members of the EU? Or
no, we are not members of the EU.
But you're members of the Schengen, right?
Yes. Members of Schengen, and we also have an agreement, an extensive agreement with the EU. So we are part of the market on the free flow of people and capital, and yes. So
so you give Schengen visa, and but at the same time you don't have a euro, and you don't, and you're not members of the EU. So you're not one of the stars of the flag. Right?
No, we are not members. And you know, some people would say we've had a referendum twice to join the EU. And there's never been a majority in Norway to join the EU, and I think some people say it's because of the word union. We have 500 years of being in unions. It doesn't sound very good in Norwegian ears.
I really love your comment. Thank you very much for saying it. Really, it's a very good food for thought, actually. Yeah. Actually,
we like our independence in Norway.
Definitely. You fought a lot for it, even if the fight was extremely emotional, but it costed a lot of lives and thoughts and heartbreak, a lot of heartbreaking.
Yes. But we support European integration, and we work very closely with our European neighbors. And
you're members of the NATO, right?
Yes.
So this is, and also I think that the Norwegian Army, which is a professional army, has had a great role in the United Nations for peacekeepers, the blue helmets all over the world for a lot of experience, even in the Middle East here,
That's true.
in Golan, and I think in Sinai back in 1973,
in
Lebanon before that, and also in 1956 Norwegian had also a company or something serving as well in the peninsula.
We still have some officers in Sinai.
Yes, they belong to the UNTSO, United Nations Truce Supervision Observers.
The multinational.
The MFO?
MFO.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So they are part of the MFO, which is the agreement of Camp David.
Yes.
So we talked about that. We have to, before we go to the Egyptian-Norwegian relations, and the last part of our program, which I don't want to finish, is simply the COVID. The COVID has been a threat to all the countries and all the human beings of the world. And the part of the problem is that a lot of people didn't accept the problem, and a lot of people still are in self-denial, and if they don't have a person or a friend or a family member who suffered from COVID, they still have a lot of skepticism, and they still are worried. And as we can see in a country, a huge country with almost all of the population who have a high school education, that's I mean the United States, we have people who are objecting the vaccination up till now, and this is hindering the normalization of the life in the United States. Tell us about the Norwegian experiment and experience with the COVID. A country that suffered, for example, from epidemic in the 13th century and the death of almost 3/4 of the population, is facing another threat in the 21st century, and it acted in a different way. What happened?
No, I think, of course, COVID, the pandemic, is showing us how dependent we are on global cooperation and how vulnerable we all are. No country can solve this alone. So we're all in this together, and I think that's why it's so important to have that we all realize that every single country has to have being able to vaccinate their population. I think in Norway, like I said earlier, Norwegians have a lot of trust in the state. So when the government tells you, and the experts tell you that you need to have a vaccination, you need to do this or this, people do that.
So almost the population is completely vaccinated now.
Yes, I think above 18 years old now, people above 18 years old are close to 90% maybe. It's very few who do not want to.
Sweden had a very bad experience with COVID, as you remember.
Yes.
And they acted in sort of denial or the herd immunity and things like that in the beginning. Norway was very strict, the medical service of Norway, and I really admire that. Norway and Denmark acted differently. They searched for isolation. They maintained isolation, obligatory isolation for quite a long time. I think you suffered. You were there in Norway at that time?
I was there, and I was working from my home office, and I found it very, very hard. But of course, I should not complain. I was very fortunate. And I think most of the measures we took in Norway were good. I think we will look back now and perhaps see that some of them were a little bit harsh. For instance, there's been some discussion about closing the elementary schools and taking all the children out. I think we will see that some children and young people have paid a high price in terms of, loneliness, and these issues are also important for your health. So, but I guess there's no perfect solution to these things.
Definitely.
We have opened up our society now, and we see that the infections are increasing again.
Yeah.
So,
especially with the winter time.
Yes.
Unfortunately, yes.
So it's difficult to know what to happen. But of course, again, we were in that very fortunate situation with the pension fund, the oil fund, and there's, like you mentioned, there's always a discussion: do we spend it? How much do we spend and put into the state budget, and how much do we save for later generations?
Yes.
And there's I think it's like 3% or something that we can spend, but that put us, of course, in a fortunate situation where we could give a lot of money to companies that avoid them to go bankrupt. We could give money to people who became unemployed, and to save businesses for when things opened up again. And of course, very few countries are able to do that.
Yes.
So that also.
So gratitude should go to the Prime Minister of the crisis, right?
Yes.
The gentleman who in the 60s had the foresight to say that we're not going to depend on the oil, we'll keep it as a reserve for times of trouble, right?
Yes, but this oil fund was that is quite new. It's not quite new, but it came later. Yeah. But that was also the result of politicians who decided that most of this we will save for future generations. So as part of the strategy when you have an aging population as well, you need that income for the tax income from a smaller part of the population. The working part of the population will be smaller to support so it's important for the coming generations that they will also have the welfare state that we have.
The age of retirement is now 65 or 60?
It's 67 mainly. It depends a bit on what kind of work you have been doing. It's like the very hard physical work, it's lower, and I think for me I'll probably work until I'm 75 or something. It keeps changing.
Long life, hopefully, inshallah, and healthy one as well.
I hope so.
After the break, we'll talk about Egyptian-Norwegian relations, which why we're here now today.
Yes.
So stay tuned with us with the World of Info coming live from Radio Cairo. So you're still listening into the World of Info in Radio Cairo, and today we have the pleasure of having Her Excellency Mrs. Hilde Klemetsdal, the Ambassador of Norway to Cairo. And you've been here for 2 months and a half, and you are walking in the footsteps of a lot of distinguished Norwegian ambassadors here to Egypt who have been working very hard in the past years for improving the Egyptian-Norwegian relations. So you're building on the road and you're going on the road. Tell us about the Egyptian-Norwegian cooperation. I think we have a strong relation that goes back to tens of years.
Yes, we do. We have strong and very good relations between Egypt and Norway, and that's one of the reasons I'm very happy to be here in this country, and so looking forward to exploring more of this country's history and culture, and there's it's just so amazing to think about the long history, and it's hard to understand as well how long the civilization has been going on in this country.
7,000 years.
It's very hard to sort of grasp that, because we were just back in the Stone Age back then, but there is of course a lot of interest in the history and the long civilization in Egypt back in Norway. So, and also a lot of tourism. I think there's also a lot of interest. Of course, now people in Norway are eager to travel again. But yes, our bilateral relations, I think we have several areas where we work very closely together, and I hope to even to strengthen and broaden that dialogue even further. But I could start with, for instance, politically, for Norway, Egypt is, of course, a very important country in the region. Of course, interested in Egypt itself, but also the role that Egypt plays in the region vis-a-vis the Israel-Palestine issue, for instance, where
we are all familiar with the Oslo Accords that helped to start the peace process.
Yes, and we have good dialogue with the Egyptian government on this issue, and the role that Egypt played now recently with the ceasefire agreement and also the reconstruction efforts. It's very important, and also I think with Libya you have a troubling. You're in a troubling neighborhood.
We're victims of geography. I told you this before.
So you're like an island of stability in the region, and
the famous sign of stability in pharaonic Egypt. Always the pharaoh had a special sort of a stick carrying in his hand, and it's called the stability.
Is it?
Yeah, which has 3 stripes in the upper one, and this is like a martial stick. It gives you an idea of how important to have a stable ruler and a stable country amid all these uncharted waters.
Uncharted, indeed. Yes, so I think for us it's also very important and interesting to have that dialogue with
and
Egypt
the economic cooperation. We're talking about investments. Do you know Norway has investments in Egypt nowadays?
Yes.
I know they are exporting a lot of beautiful salmon to us, but Norwegian salmon, but also what do you do as well, exports and imports?
So I think we have a potential for more trade between our two countries. It's not very big. So I think we should look into, there's absolutely potential for more. We export, of course, we do export some, what was it, minerals, I think, and both ways, but also we import fruits from Egypt, and I would think there's definitely more potential for that. Personally, I think we should start importing lots more fruits.
Yes,
but because you have such great great fruits in like mangoes, for instance. So we have very few types that we import, and I was really amazed to come here and see there are so many different kinds of mangoes. But yeah, I think we export salmon, so fish, and different other kinds of seafood, but also some natural gas as well, some electric machinery. But it's not huge. We also have some Norwegian companies here. Recently, there was an MOU being signed where a Norwegian company was starting the green hydrogen project in Egypt. So there's quite a few investments and interest in the green shift and the renewable energy. So that's also something I find very interesting. And then, of course, we come to climate change again, and we are very eager to work with Egypt when Egypt is hosting the next UN climate conference next year.
Yes, we're very proud to have that. And President Sisi was very sure that he's going to make this, and reassuring the people of the world that next year we'll see more improvement in this aspect of saving the environment. And before we leave, we have to talk about 3 famous Norwegians that I believe have carried a lot of things to the world. We have Epson, we have Greg, the music, the beautiful music of Greg, Ibsen, the famous writer and poet.
Yes.
And we should never forget somebody who loved Egypt and worked with Egypt, Thor Heyerdahl.
Yes, absolutely.
Famous gentleman who had an interest of building the Kontakiti raft.
Yes.
Proving that the Norwegians went to the United States before, or to America before the famous Columbus. But also Thor Heyerdahl did the Ra boat in the early 70s and manufactured it from papyrus and made the expedition to prove that the Egyptians crossed the road as pure great navigators. So this was one of a fascinating man who did a lot of cooperation between Egypt and Norway as early as the 70s of the last century.
Yes.
So Greg, Ibsen, Thor Heyerdahl, and of course Her Excellency Ambassador Hilde Klemetsdal are ambassadors of Norway to Egypt. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for coming to our program. We really enjoyed your company, and may you promise us to come back again to talk more about
I would
Norway
love to. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And today we are having Her Excellency Ambassador Hilde Klemetsdal, the Ambassador of Norway to Egypt. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Dua Muhammad was at the control, and we were coming live from Studio 3 in World of Info, Radio Cairo. Stay tuned with us.